The movie begins with a narration about the last full moon of spring. The narrator explains that on that very night, the long nightmare of the town of Tarker Mills began. Meanwhile, a railroad worker named Arnie Westrom heads to the tracks to clear the path. As he works, a mysterious creature watches him from nearby. After finishing the job, Arnie quickly tries to leave, but then he notices a massive footprint in the mud. Suddenly, he's brutally attacked, and the horrifying screams of the creature echo through the town, heard by the local residents. The narrator comments that the killings had already begun, but at first, nobody paid much attention because Arnie was known as a drunk. Everyone assumed it was just an accident. The coroner concludes that Arnie passed out on the tracks and was crushed by a train. Later, the town's festival celebrations begin, and we're introduced to the Kozloff family. Father Bob, Mother Nan, and their 2 children, Jane and Marty. Nan asks Jane to go find Marty because she's worried about him, and we learn that Marty has trouble walking and uses a wheelchair. At the same time, Brady watches Jane from a distance and says he has a plan, while Marty reluctantly agrees to go along with it. As Jane approaches, a snake suddenly appears in front of her, causing her to scream and fall down in fear. But she soon realizes it was all just a prank by the boys, which makes her furious. Marty insists it was only a joke, but Brady takes things too far and throws the fake snake at Jane, making her fall into the mud. Angry and humiliated, Jane storms off, saying she hates her brother. On her way back, she sees a woman arguing with a man, unknowingly witnessing the next victim of the werewolf. Later, the family returns home, and Bob asks Jane to help her brother. While they're talking, Marty asks if Uncle Red is coming over. Jane says yes, but tells Marty to stop thinking so highly of him because Red is just a cranky alcoholic. Marty tries to defend his uncle, but Jane leaves him alone and walks away. That night, Marty goes into Jane's room to apologize. He even gives her his pocket money so she can buy new socks, and Jane reluctantly forgives him. Taking the opportunity, Marty asks if what she said about Uncle Red was true. Jane confirms it, but apologizes for the way she said it and explains that their uncle is going through a divorce. Happy to hear that, Marty admits he never liked Red's wife anyway. That same night, the woman who was shown arguing earlier prepares to take her own life after becoming pregnant and being abandoned. But before she can do it, the monster arrives and begins climbing toward the house. Sensing someone nearby, the woman turns around, only to be brutally murdered by the beast. Hearing her screams, her mother rushes upstairs and finds her daughter dead on the bed. The next day, Sheriff Joe struggles to figure out who's responsible for the young woman's murder. His deputy asks what he plans to do next, and Joe reveals that he has called in a detective for help. Later, Marty is playing with his friend Tammy when they notice several police officers at the crime scene. Frightened, the two watch everything from a distance. Marty tells Tammy to hurry, and when they arrive at her house, she admits she's scared because the murdered young woman was her neighbor. Tammy also says she's been hearing strange noises coming from her father's greenhouse. Before leaving, Marty tells her not to worry and says goodbye. That night, Marty keeps himself distracted by listening to Uncle Red's stories. But Nan doesn't like seeing her brother drinking alcohol in front of her son, so she sends Marty to his room. After he leaves, Nan tells Red not to drink around Marty because she's afraid it could influence him badly. Red insists that his nephew is much smarter than people think, and that he's more than just a boy who can't walk. Annoyed, Nan replies that it's easy for him to say because he only visits once in a while and then leaves again, while she's the one constantly worried her son might give up on life. Red calmly tells her that Marty is a strong kid. Nan says her son looks up to him as an inspiration, and seeing him in this condition could break Marty's heart. That same night, Tammy's father is watching TV when he suddenly hears knocking outside. Irritated, he grabs his shotgun and goes out to investigate. He enters the greenhouse and finds several flower pots smashed on the ground. Angry, he continues searching the area and suddenly jumps after spotting a spider. He moves deeper inside, but another noise behind him makes him panic, causing him to fire his gun. Without warning, the entire place begins shaking, and a terrifying creature bursts out from beneath the ground, dragging him down into the darkness. The next day, people read in the newspaper that the police believe the murders were committed by some crazed maniac. Authorities urge everyone to obey the town's curfew, and frightened residents begin staying indoors before nightfall. Meanwhile, Marty and Brady are flying a kite in the park, enjoying themselves, until their fun is interrupted by Jane, who tells her brother that dinner is ready. Marty reluctantly decides to leave with her and asks if Brady is coming too. but his friend says he'll come later, which immediately makes Marty uneasy. Later, at the town bar, Andy keeps questioning Sheriff Haller's ability to handle the case. One man tries to calm him down, saying the investigation is still ongoing. But Andy angrily calls the investigation a joke, causing Officer Peter to snap and lunge at him in fury. The argument suddenly stops when Brady's father, Herb Kincaid, shows up and asks if anyone has seen him. At the same moment, Joe is holding the badly shaken boy's kite, now covered in blood. Herb arrives with Peter and rushes to see the boy's body. The moment he realizes it's his son, he lets out an angry scream. The next morning, Brady's funeral is held at the church, where his body is blessed by Reverend Lester Lowe. After the service, Red offers Marty a ride home, and the boy agrees. On the way, Red says they better catch the killer soon, and Marty shares his theory. He asks, "What if the killer is actually some kind of monster?" Red laughs at the idea, but doesn't completely rule it out. He asks what kind of monster Marty thinks it could be. Marty says it might be a werewolf, making Red laugh again as he says that's quite an imagination. Marty explains that his friend heard growling noises coming from the greenhouse, and later that same night, her father died. Red tells him to get that idea out of his head because the killer is just a human being like everyone else. He explains that crazy people tend to become more dangerous during a full moon, but promises they'll catch him soon enough. That same night, Andy gathers a group of men and starts giving them instructions to hunt down the madman. Just then, Joe arrives and orders everyone to go home. But Andy cuts him off, reminding him that he only has Peter helping him, and they still haven't solved a single murder. Joe insists that the law must be followed and once again tells everyone to head home. Andy tells the crowd not to be afraid, but suddenly Herb steps forward and angrily tells him to shut up. Herb says he just came from his son's funeral and demands silence. Joe walks up to him and says he understands what he's going through, but urges him to think clearly. Through tears, Herb says none of those words matter because Brady was torn to pieces. He asks how Joe can stop them from getting justice. Joe stays silent. Herb then declares that he'll take justice into his own hands, which fires up the rest of the crowd as well. Reverend Lester Lowe arrives and tries to stop them, but fails. The sheriff tells him to let them go because he already tried talking them out of it. Lester Lowe feels like he knows something and continues trying to stop the mob, but once again, he fails. The group begins the hunt and heads deep into the forest, splitting up as they search for the suspect. Andy's group moves forward carefully, but suddenly they hear strange noises coming from the woods and immediately get ready. Andy suggests they form a line and move together in formation. As they continue deeper into the forest, they hear terrifying growls echoing through the trees. Then a thick fog slowly covers the entire area, making everyone panic. Suddenly, a man gets attacked and dragged into the fog. Panicking, another man says they should fall back, but he gets attacked too. Terrified, the remaining people start running for their lives while another man is captured. The next day, Reverend Lester Lowe holds another prayer service for the dead. Lester looks disturbed, but he continues his speech, struggling to find the right words. Herb suddenly bursts into insane laughter and says that words bring no comfort. Real comfort comes from taking justice into your own hands. Lester tries to calm everyone down, but the crowd seems irritated and restless. Suddenly, everyone starts transforming into werewolves. The horrifying sight terrifies the Reverend, and he wakes up screaming in the middle of the night, revealing that it was all just a nightmare. Later, the Kozlov family heads to the park, but when they find it closed, Marty becomes upset. Jane asks why everyone always listens to her brother. Their parents explain that they already told him to stop bothering Marty, which only annoys her even more. They decide to head back home, and on the way, they hear warnings about obeying the curfew. During a barbecue, Marty vents to Uncle Red. He says that the monster has killed several people, including his friend, and now even the park has been shut down. Red tells him that he understands his frustration, but he has something that might cheer him up. He asks Marty to close his eyes and then reveals a brand new vehicle he built especially for him. Red teaches Marty how to drive it, and Marty excitedly starts riding around. After having fun, he returns home and talks with Red again. His uncle says he made the vehicle to keep him entertained, but warns him to be careful because it can be dangerous. Later, they eat dinner together, but Red says he has to leave. He asks Marty to walk him to the car and gives him some fireworks. Before leaving, he reminds Marty to obey the curfew and says goodbye. Later that night, Marty decides to sneak out through the window and ride around on his vehicle while setting off fireworks. After a while, he reaches an isolated spot and starts launching them, completely unaware that someone is watching him. As soon as he gets distracted, the monster moves closer. The moment Marty senses its presence, he panics. But even in fear, he manages to hit the creature in the eye with a firework and quickly escapes from there. Shaking with fear, Marty drives at full speed and somehow makes it back home, climbing through the window in a hurry. Terrified, he calls Red and tells him that he saw the werewolf. But Red dismisses it as nothing more than a bad dream. Marty insists that it's true, but Red doesn't believe him and tells him to go to sleep. He also says that there's no such thing as werewolves. The next morning, Jane comes to check on her brother and asks if he's okay because he's been standing there for hours. Marty says he needs to talk to her because Red didn't believe him, and Jane asks what's going on. Then a new narration begins in the voice of an older Jane. She says that at the time, his story sounded unbelievable, but she still believed most of what he said. She decides to help her brother because she can tell he truly believes every word. Jane then starts going door to door collecting cans as part of the plan they came up with, because Marty had struck the creature in the eye, leaving it blind in one eye. Jane keeps searching for the suspect but can't find him anywhere. And little by little, she starts regretting believing in Marty. On the way, she stops by the Reverend's house to drop off the cans and tells him that she's upset with her brother. The Reverend says that siblings often act that way with each other. Then he asks her to place the cans in the garage. Without suspecting anything, Jane walks inside, but she doesn't recognize the man with the injured eye. As she's putting the cans down, she suddenly gets startled by a rat and falls to the ground. When she gets back up, she notices the same walking cane that had been used by a man earlier. Just then, Lester walks in and asks if there's a problem, and Jane notices his injured eye. Shocked, she starts trembling. Lester asks if she's okay and even offers to help her and drive her home. Terrified, Jane refuses and quickly leaves. Meanwhile, the Reverend asks her to give Marty a message. When she gets home, she reveals who the real killer is, leaving Marty stunned. Jane asks what they're supposed to do now because they can't tell the adults. Marty says he knows exactly what to do, and he writes a letter to the Reverend saying that he knows his secret and warning him to stop or he'll expose everything. For the next few days, they keep sending letters, and eventually, they tell Red everything. Red says he expected this kind of behavior from Marty, but not from Jane, and tells them to start acting sensible. Jane says she doesn't understand, but Red angrily asks what she's talking about because the two of them are basically telling the Reverend to kill himself. Marty explains that he stabbed the creature in the eye, and now the Reverend suddenly has an eye patch. But even after hearing the entire explanation, Red still refuses to believe the kids. Marty says that by now, Lester has probably already destroyed all the evidence. Red says he's too old for games like werewolves and tells them to forget about it. Still, they convince him to take them to the man's house where they find him painting. Red questions how a man with such serious injuries could be painting instead of being in a hospital. Marty explains that when he hit him, the man was in his monstrous form. Red says this game has gone far enough and asks Jane if she actually believes any of this. Jane admits that she doesn't even know what's real anymore, but she definitely felt something strange in the garage. She tells Red to trust Marty now the same way he always has. Later, Marty sadly watches his friends playing together. At that moment, Lester arrives and starts staring at him. His friends invite him over for a soda, but he refuses and says he's heading home. While leaving, Marty realizes the Reverend is following him and trying to kill him. He immediately speeds up his vehicle, but Lester catches up and tries to throw him off the bridge. He fails, and Marty takes the chance to escape again. Soon, Marty realizes his vehicle is running out of gas, so he decides to take a shortcut. The chase continues until the Reverend's truck gets stuck on a dirt road. Marty uses the opportunity to head toward a broken bridge. But just then, his vehicle runs out of fuel, leaving him trapped. As he sees the Reverend approaching, he panics and begs him to let him go. Lester says Marty should have left him alone, but instead he kept sending letters. He reveals that he read those letters, but according to his religion, suicide is the greatest sin. He says that's why he killed Stella, though he also claims he saved her before it was too late. Furious, Lester says he's doing everything according to God's will, but the boy interfered. He declares that now he'll throw Marty off the bridge and make it look like an accident. Suddenly, They hear the sound of a tractor, and Marty realizes it's Mr. Zimmerman. He starts screaming for help at the top of his lungs, forcing the Reverend to flee the scene. Later, Marty tells his uncle everything. Red says the story is hard to believe, and Jane suggests they should talk to the sheriff. Red says it'll be difficult because Marty's story sounds like a crazy horror tale that nobody would believe. Then he carefully examines Marty's vehicle and notices pieces of the Reverend's car bodywork stuck to it, making him start to believe their story. Later, Red goes to the police station and tells Joe everything. Joe says it's the craziest story he's ever heard and asks if Red actually believes it himself. Red hesitates for a moment, but then says the Reverend should still be investigated. Joe agrees to look into it, and Red leaves the station. After that, Joe goes to the Reverend's house and knocks on the door, but no one answers. So, he decides to look around the property. He enters the garage to inspect the car and finds damaged bodywork. As he continues investigating, he suddenly runs into Lester, who asks him what he wants. Joe pulls out his gun and tells Lester that he needs to come with him. But the Reverend knocks the gun out of his hand and says that none of this is his fault. Then, right in front of Joe, he starts transforming and brutally kills him. In the following days, Red meets with his nephews, and Marty says that the sheriff still hasn't shown up. Red asks what he can even do, and Marty hands him a silver necklace, telling him to turn it into bullets. Red keeps trying to understand how a human could possibly turn into a wolf and says that none of it makes any sense. Marty admits that he doesn't fully understand it either, but he explains that on the night of the full moon, the creature will come after them because they injured him. Now Lester won't be able to control himself anymore. Only a furious monster will remain. Red decides to help them, and the three of them visit a man who makes bullets. Red gives him the necklace, and the man immediately understands the situation and agrees to help. He makes a silver bullet for Red and warns him that the shot has to be perfectly accurate. On the night of the full moon, the kids' parents leave for a trip and place the children in Red's care. Later that night, all three of them fall asleep, unaware that the monster has already arrived near the house. Red accidentally burns himself with a cigarette and wakes up. The kids warn him to be careful so he doesn't accidentally fire the gun. Red says they should all go back to sleep because it's already 3 a.m. and the monster still hasn't shown up. But they refuse, and Red promises to stay awake with the gun. Just as he tries to take Marty back to his room, Jane suddenly spots the werewolf outside the window and screams in terror. Everyone immediately goes on alert. Red rushes to the window to look, but he can't see anything. Frustrated, he removes the bullet from the gun and says he's done falling for tricks, telling the kids to go to sleep. Suddenly, the monster cuts the power to the house, throwing everyone into panic. Red tells them to stay calm. They hear noises coming from the front door and prepare for an attack, but the creature suddenly appears from behind them instead. Red tries to fire the gun, but the monster smashes it out of his hands, sending the silver bullet rolling into a drain. Marty rushes to retrieve it while Red gets thrown across the room. Red quickly gets back on his feet and runs to help Jane. He confronts the monster, but the creature is far stronger and throws him aside once again. Meanwhile, the brother and sister manage to recover the bullet and reload the gun. Marty finally fires at the monster. The creature collapses to the floor and slowly begins transforming back into a human. Suddenly, the body jerks back up, terrifying everyone. But it turns out to be nothing more than a final twitch. Marty assures them that the monster is truly dead. He thanks his sister for believing in him and tells her that he loves her. And with that, the story comes to an end.